right, joined now by Sandy Stotsky. Sandy and I have had a lot of conversations. She is really the foremost teacher of language arts assessment and teaching in the country today, and she has had a major role to play in challenging the protocols of Common Core. She was hired by the Common Core people to validate their own program, and she could not in good conscience do it. And since then, she's been turning out a lot of really good, interesting, sane solutions to public education. Well, I think this will be a fascinating conversation. We're going to start today by talking about what are the consequences for education about the upcoming election. We're about 3 weeks out from the November election. This is going to be, by all accounts, a completely exciting and possibly disturbing election. You listen to what's going on here. It may be the turnout may be absolutely huge. It sounds like that's going to happen anyway. People are concerned about ballot harvesting. No one knows really what's going to happen in this election, and really nobody knows for sure if the polls are reliable or not. But having said that, one way or the other, we're going to reelect Donald Trump, or we're going to have Joe Biden as president. And I want to start with Joe Biden. If we get a Biden administration, which is going to be very much a Kamala Harris Biden administration, this vice president will have perhaps more to do than any vice president in American history in terms of shaping policy. What do you expect for the Department of Education under Joe Biden?
It's going to be difficult to figure out exactly what would be different from what happened under the Obama administration, since for 8 years Biden was there. And we haven't heard in the debates, at least I haven't heard any particular mention of education issues. So I don't know that there's going to be anything new or different from the idea that we have a Common Core based nationwide curriculum set of standards for English and for math and for science, which will piggyback off of what's in math. So far as we know, they will start from scratch, choosing who they want for the Department of Education, which started, I would like to remind people, back in President Jimmy Carter's administration as a full-fledged cabinet position, even though there now are some questions about whether it should stay as a cabinet position or be lowered so it's not. I mean, that's a different argument, and that one I'm not prepared to talk about today. But we do have some possible candidates that came up 4 years ago when the question was who would be the Secretary of Education if Hillary Clinton won. So now we have to think about who might be a good Secretary of Education if Biden wins the presidency and Kamala Harris is the vice president.
Well, one thing I want to throw at you, you said that, I agree with you, we're going to get a continuation of what Obama policies were. There's already talk that if Biden does win, we're going to see a lot of Obama staffers just come right back, right? It's going to look very much like Obama's White House. But here's what I want to throw at you. I think it's more than just Common Core. I think what you're going to see from a Biden, particularly a Kamala Harris administration, is somebody at the Department of Education who is going to take that next step from federalizing education, giving the feds a large control over what's taught, to now implementing Black Lives Matter curriculum, 1619 history standards. I think you're going to begin to see this. The person they put in charge will use the power that Common Core and No Child Left Behind and Goals 2000 all gave the feds to then really move in that next step and politicize much more dramatically what's going on in education. What say you?
I agree. And it might well be a continuation with someone like Linda Darling Hammond, who was widely bruited as the person who would become the Secretary of Education during the second term of Obama's presidency because of their friendship and the fact that she was also identified as an African American, and this would be part of what would be desired. Supposedly, you're mentioning the Afrocentric curricula. The problem, one of the many problems I see, is that all of these approaches that were tried out in the 60s, 70s, and afterwards with Afrocentric curricula, not one of them produced any evidence of helping to stimulate minority children, particularly black minority children, to do better academically. So we don't know what they could do. Even the 1619 project that the New York Times is putting out has been cast into a lot of doubt by many mainstream historians who find it missing in documentation and background. And certainly coming from the area around Plymouth Colony and the Mayflower, I could say that there's been a lot of material that is often taught to children in New England, at least, certainly in Massachusetts, that was there, that is documented by what is around there, but would not be necessarily part of national history. So she's only one of several possibilities that could happen for a Secretary of Education. And as I say, we don't know of anything that has been successful. You mentioned Afrocentric curricula, but they don't have any track record, nor do the dialect-based kinds of readers, the beginning reading approach that was tried out in Washington or Oregon, one of those two states, many years ago, and never seemed dialect-based readers. Basically, that was what they were called. They didn't produce any good results. No one liked them. But that doesn't mean they won't be promoted by a Department of Education that thinks that Black lives matter so much that they've got to change the school curriculum, which will render children in this country unable to compete internationally with others using a much stronger curriculum.
Yep, that's what I wanted to follow up with what you said. You mentioned that in the 60s and the 70s when we tried this already, it didn't go anywhere, and there were a lot of people who called this out. The problem, it seems to me, Sandy, is 50 years ago there was still a large contingent of the educational apparatus that cared about results. I don't see them anymore. It seems like all the superintendents, all the principals, all the educrats, all the funders of education aren't funding success. They're funding ideology. That wasn't true in the 1960s and 70s. It seems true today that what we want is an educational system that does not focus on academic achievement, which we're now calling white supremacy, right? Merit, meritocracy, reason, the scientific method, objectivity, these things have all been branded racism now. So what's different between then and now is now that the people in charge consciously want, for lack of a better word, an unacademic academic curriculum that teaches largely sociology and left-wing politics.
Right. And I agree with you totally. And it also is very much aligned with what it calls socio-cultural approaches. That is even coming through on the newly proposed standards for NAEP, National Assessment for Educational Progress, where the latest revision has introduced this notion of what might have been called a version of reader response a long time ago, but now has been broadened to designate groups of children, and they're going to be allowed to have their own views of what is in a work, a literary work, or anything that they read, as they see fit, depending upon their particular ethnicity, race, or gender. And this is a little bit like reader response, but it becomes more oriented towards the stereotypes, it seems to me, that people have, because I don't know how one would assess how children respond to something that reflects their own ethnicity or race.
Well, unfortunately, Sandy, the question of that question has already been answered. They're assuming to be white is to be privileged, to be white is to be tied into white supremacy, and not to be is to be victimized. So what we're already seeing in the schools, even still under the Trump administration, Betsy DeVos has not done enough or doesn't have the power, she thinks, to do enough to stop this, is you're already scapegoating kids. You're saying the most we're going to do in terms of analyzing this is if you're white, you've got to learn that whiteness is evil. If you're not white, you have to learn why whiteness is evil and what you can do about it. But before we move on, I want to make sure we do this. I think we both agree that if you get a Biden administration, which is going to be largely a Kamala administration in many ways, you're going to get an administration that's going to double down on the politicizing of the classroom, double down on using the American public school system to promote a very radical agenda. I think that's no doubt. But what happens if we get 4 more years of Donald Trump? I mean, Betsy DeVos is a mixed bag here, right? On the one hand, she denied Common Core was even in the schools. She said, we don't have to take it out because it's not even in there. We're not doing Common Core anymore, even though she was on Jeb Bush's Common Core committee. Having said that, while she really did nothing to change what was going on in the classroom with regards to Common Core-based learning, she has fought back against due process violations. She has challenged the Obama presidency for its Dear Colleague letter, which allowed young boys on college campuses to have their due process rights denied. Donald Trump, and then backed up by Betsy DeVos, also came out recently and condemned critical race theory in the classroom, which is a good step, right? This idea that we're going to transform education into nothing more than just racial identity politics. Both DeVos and Trump seem to have pushed back against that. What do you think is going to happen in the next 4 years if we keep Betsy DeVos in that position, or who might, in your mind, replace her?
It's going to be difficult to find a replacement that will actually move the entire curriculum and the training of our teachers, which is the critical part of all of this, in a 180-degree different direction. This country isn't ready for stronger standards. This is what I found in Massachusetts. I was able, because I was in a position and supported by people within the administration, to achieve a higher level for our standards so that we could have a higher level emerge from what teachers' efforts were. And I was also in charge of teacher licensing. We believed strongly that we needed to have teachers better prepared to teach to higher or stronger academic standards. But that isn't the direction that we've been going in the past year or so. And so that and school choice, and I want to get back to that because that is something that President Trump and Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education at this point, who may stay in office for another couple of years anyway, or another year or so, but those are some of the issues that we haven't really addressed. If you have school choice, which many people seem to think is the way, that is the only way that has been found to increase this academic achievement of low achieving students. Sorry for that mouthful, but this is only because they also have to lower the standards to make them accessible to Common Core based or aligned tests. That's been part of the problem with Common Core because it has also affected publicly funded school charters. And that has not, and while in some cases you can find that students have done better, it's hard to find by the high school level any greater achievement, and certainly going on to college, any greater level of accomplishment. But what you said earlier was more important. Academic achievement is becoming less and less valued by itself. No one wants it. It's the color of the kid's skin that seems to matter to those who are promoting and who will continue to promote what they want. And as more and more so-called white parents with white children decline in numbers, literal numbers, in our public schools as a percentage of the total number of public school students, there will be more children who come from other backgrounds and who will have been sold the bill of goods that this is a bad country to identify with. And everything that comes, even though they themselves may have come from countries as in South America or Central America that actually reflect Western civilization, not in its best or shining aspects, but at least that is part of where their readings stem from, the literary giants that they read if they go on to high school in their own countries. But we have nothing to look forward to, even this wonderful new project for U.S. history that Wilfred McClay and Peter Wood and several other people have been asked to be part of. That will be stopped. We are not going to get a U.S. history set of standards or a civics curriculum that most parents and grandparents actually favor. So we're going to be in for a lot of conflict, it seems to me. That's going to be the major output of the next few years in education, as there are battles at the local level between what older residents are willing to pay because taxes are going to be raised and what the mandates through the USED, the federal branch of education, is going to insist needs to be funded for safety purposes or for identity purposes or whatever is seen as the right approach.
Sandy, this is a really good introduction to a conversation we're going to continue to have. I urge the audience to stick around in short order. Within the next week, we're going to have part 2 of this series. We're going to take this a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about some other related issues as well. A good first step in trying to understand where we're heading. Sandy Stotsky, thanks for your time today, and we'll get part 2 of this program filmed soon.